Well, hello everybody, and welcome to our beautiful members. Thank you so much for joining us today on Members Channel. And I hope I'm not freezing up. My laptop has just decided to restart itself, so usually takes a few minutes to settle. Yay, we've got Jessie in the background again today. We're going to be doing the Charlie Kirk assassination, basically, the Decode, and just see what Jessie has to say about that. Anyway, welcome, you guys. And without any further ado, I'm bringing Jessie on
Hello, hello.
to stage. Oopsie.
I'll talk shanty and you just move your mouth. That sounds like a fun shenanigan.
Isn't this hilarious? Yeah, totally. And I have found though, if my laptop restarts or something, it takes a few minutes to settle in. And I hope that's what it is. But I got to say, lately, with certain shows, wow, I mean, there was one show not too long ago with Beverly Rose, and literally within um, suddenly we dropped from however amount of viewers there were by 70. Just
Wow.
went poof like that. Everyone was complaining that their screens blacked out for a few seconds. And then, I mean, I was getting messages saying what's going on. Um, so, yeah, they certainly don't like us talking about certain topics, and especially, of
Right,
course, the Hillary Clinton thing last few days, right? Wow.
right.
How are you
That
after
was
that? Are you
crazy.
fine?
I am doing
Yeah.
well after that, but I mean, it's crazy the spiritual warfare. I did get a lot of spiritual warfare after that, right after that show, and had just some paranormal activity that it's like, what in the world? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely intensifying at the moment, isn't it? It's kind of
Yes.
like I, I think people are really being forced to be accountable um, for our own actions, right? Because isn't that ultimately
Right.
what it's about? Us being accountable. And it's all well and good us seeing this world stage playing itself out in the way that it is, yet we ourselves are running around doing crazy things, right?
Right. So true.
Anyway, well, do you want to maybe open for us in prayer before we get on to
Yes.
Charlie
Let's
Kirk?
do that. Heavenly Father, we come before you and we thank you for this time together. We ask, Lord, that you would put a special guard over our computers, our airwaves, our internets, Lord. We ask, Lord, for your grace today that we may be able to have this conversation, and we rebuke all evil. We rebuke any spirits that would try to come and cause retaliation or kickback for these conversations. And Lord, we just ask for that safeguard over all the shows and the hosts and the guests that Shanti brings on, as well as our audience, Lord. We thank you for such a great authority, Lord, that you have given to us. And we ask that we may go forth with joy and be led forth with peace, Lord, as we come and go each day. And we ask for this in your powerful name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Jessie. And hello
Mm-hmm.
to you ladies in the chat. Nice to see you there.
Right?
And as we know, this is a members only show, so which is always nice. I must say, I love the members because, of course, there's um, not that I don't like the crowds. Make no mistake, I do, but it's a different type of sort of intimacy, I think, right? That we get
Yeah,
to
so true.
chat. Which, Yeah, which is lovely. So, Jessie, this whole Charlie Kirk debacle, I mean, it has been
It's a
battered all
debacle for sure.
over main, yeah, mainstream media, social media, alternative media, lies media, truth media, every continent media. And of course, there's a whole host of, I want to say propaganda, but is it propaganda?
Right,
Stories. One thing I love, I have to say, about the times we're living in is that with social media being what it is, there are incredible internet sleuths. They really, really, really are. I mean, there are guys that dig up stuff, and a lot of the stuff they're getting off the dark net, no doubt, or the dark web,
right,
which has been there. And yes, as we always say, we have to be really careful because there are a
right.
lot of charlatans out there, and wolves in sheep's clothing. Um, so we do have to be discerning. But when we're looking at certain, I want to say facts, but there again, I have not seen it myself. I was not there, so it cannot be factual, from my perspective.
Right.
But things that we are seeing and that have played out on the media, certain things are irrevocable, Um, when you see them, you can't unsee them.
Yeah.
And, with so much also CGI going on, you
Yeah,
know.
that's a huge
Um,
that's so huge.
so yeah, I mean, it's just crazy times indeed, right? It's really a stage right now. The world is such a stage at the moment. So, yay, go ahead, Jess. The stage is all
Yeah.
yours.
Well, I want to first give a few references. I did a couple special reports on this, which you can find on the kingdomlivingwithjessie.com under the Unveiling the System series. But, one of the things that I didn't really talk about in there that was interesting was that the day he died was 9/11. And you prior to this, think about all the media promotion that has gone on about that day. We'll never forget. We'll never forget, you know, and yet not a single media source, nobody talked about 9/11 on that day. And it was like, why is that? Over, the one thing that has always caught my attention about all of that was that when that happened, it was reported that there was a daycare on site with over 3,000 children. And that, like there was never anything else. Like they did not find the children. There was never any other reports about it. They were never talked about again. So there's some curious things in that. So, Charlie takes the center stage. Um, and again, I'll give a disclaimer, like I'm not trying to be rude, if he's really dead and his family's grieving, I get that and I want to be sensitive to that. But at the same time, the things I see, I question. Is he really dead? When you get into kind of the backstory of some of the pieces that we've had, I think we have reasonable evidence to say he's not dead. Um, and then on top of that, it's my personal belief that he's part of the system. Is he,
Mhm.
and here's the curious thing we're going to get into because of the players we see kind of coming onto the scene. Um, and this is going to interconnect with the what you talked about, the AI generation. Um, did or do we have individuals within our country who AI generated, made fake, Epstein videos. We'll put that out. Did they make fake Epstein videos? Were they planning to release those fake Epstein videos, you know, into um, Congress, make them public release, and with that, with their fake Epstein videos and pictures, were they, plotting to basically um, take over our government from we the people? Now, I've talked about last year my concerns as certain players came on the scene, especially probably last 2 years, um, as players came into the scene with the Senate and the House. And I've said that our Senate and our House are stacked heavy with sovereign military. In fact, I pointed out, is anybody else concerned that our Speaker of the House is sovereign military? When you look at the succession for the president and who kind of would take over if anything would happen to the president, basically at this point we have all sovereign military in there in those positions to, they'd be in charge of our country. And that, would put us under a foreign military and under the Galactic Federation, ultimately, universally. So, different authorities and jurisdictions. So, as we get into that, one of the curious things, kind of right off the bat, you have Cash Patel pop up. And what does Cash Patel say? We've got the watch. Brother, we've got the watch. We'll see you in Valhalla. Now, I get into in my video the connection with Odinism, which is one of your brotherhood orders. Some of the things that you would see that are connected to your order of Odin or the Odinism it starts with our national parks. When you see the sigil for the national park, you kind of see this upside down arrowhead. In that, you see a buffalo, you see a pine tree, and you see some mountains. Whenever we see those mountains in the city sigils, or it is over the national parks there, or if you see it in the crest, that's gonna go back to your Order of Odin, and that they have control of that area, that they're one of the groups. And it's common to see your Order of Odin go hand in hand with either your ancient Order of the Tall Trees, also called the Cedars of Lebanon, which is why in the um, National Parks sigil we see the mountains right next to the tree there. That tree representing that Order of the Tall Trees, also known as your foresters. So that's one of the groups that you'll see go hand in hand with your Odinites. The other older Masonic group that they can be under usually is your Order of the Red Men. Now, your Order of the Red Men can be connected to your Order of the White Buffalo, which is what we also see in the symbol for your national parks. For sovereign military, what you're going to see, because your Odinism starts to get into your Norse religions and contracts with Norse deities, which, the countries that are commonly under that are going to be Norway and Sweden. And, they're going to bring in those Norse god contracts. So it's common to see, that your sovereign military connected to the Odinism may not necessarily be connected to the Jesuit Catholic Church like some of your other knight groups are. Like, your Knights of Malta, your Knights of Garter, your Knights of Columbus, your Knights of Opus Dei, all of those you're going to find, usually somehow connected between the Masonic lodges as well as the Catholic Church. There can be a high connection to the Illuminati in that. But your Odinism, because it gets more into, away from necessarily the Christian perception, or the Christian cover life. Um, and it's not saying they can't have that. But, a lot of your Odinism is going to get away from the Catholic, be more into the Protestant mainstream, particularly Lutheran connections or Lutheran Synod connections. And you'll see them connected to your night groups like the Sons of Liberty, which we've talked about. You'll see like that, coat of arms for the Sons of Liberty. You'll see the blue banner at the top of that shield or coat of arms, and then they'll have the draping red and white stripes to represent the flag. So there's a high connection with, your Sons of Liberty, the Lutheran Church connection, when you start to get into the Odinism and then the worship of the Norse gods. Now, there were a few things that Kash Patel, when he made his statement, were very prominent. One, he called Charlie a brother. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody who calls somebody a brother is connected to the system. I've had, very dear Christian brothers or sisters in the Lord that's like our common conversation. It's like, oh, brother, you know, but um, but it was in the context that he calls him brother and then says, "We'll see you in Valhalla." And Valhalla is very specific because in Odinism, there are two types of burials. And when you know this, then you understand that statement in the context that Kash Patel meant it, because in their belief system, only only those who die a warrior's death, only those who are in good standing, basically, how they see it is either you're our brother and you're in our military or you're not. Okay, so to be brother means you're in good compliance and you're in a place of right standing, meaning you're not trying to defect, you're not trying to get out of the system. You've been, you're in your circle groups, you've kept all your vows and secrets, right? And the second part of that is that, you know, o- you have to die a warrior's death. And that's specific because they believed, basically that, you know, your death, what's considered a warrior's death is you're dying on the battlefield with your most precious possessions, which are your weapons of warfare. And when we look at that, then we see now another picture about Charlie Kirk, which we'll get into in a minute. What were the circumstances around his death? Um, Supposed death, we'll say. So finishing with Valhalla there. So that if, let's look at what would happen if a warrior was not in right standing. They wouldn't get to go to Valhalla. Instead, they would go to Volk Wagner, which is a meadow. And here's the differences between the two. And this kind of gets funny in their belief system because both are very sexualized. Okay. Volk Wagner is a meadow that is overseen by the goddess, and I think I've got her name here somewhere, but I forget. I don't usually like keep track of all the little names and stuff. But oh, Freya. So Odin's ex-wife, Freya, oversees Volk Wagner, and it's kind of that place where he kind of like, shunned her to this valley. But Freya was known to be a very beautiful, seductive woman. So now you've got this siren spirit that's overseeing this meadow, and she's surrounded by all these priestesses and beautiful women. Okay, so bonus for, you know, the, the Odinites who don't get to go to Valhalla, they still get to have the highly sexualized meadow. But now, they're going to be making love under trees and in this field all day long. And the only thing that they miss out on is the feast and the beer and the wine and their brethren and making love with women with all their brethren around while they're eating. And that includes the salted pork. So there isn't any salted pork you know, in Volk Wagner because who knows, maybe Freya was a vegetarian. You're gonna have lots in the field to eat, but it ain't gonna be salted pork. Um, but what's significant about that is that when you know in the system, salted pork is seen in their imagery, and we see that in some of the coat of arms. Like I've pointed out, Biltmore, that's part of their coat of arms. The Vanderbilts, they have like the three pig heads in their shield, that representing the salted pork. Sometimes it can be seen in barrels on the coat of arms. And that became, when you understand the background, that became their image for a mason's or, a brother's wages. And further in that, wages for what? Not just real salted pork. It's that they have access to the underground meat markets, and that includes the cannibalism and the human meats. So, um, that's part of that, which, then, at some point you have to say, "Oh my gosh, wait a second. Are you telling me that Odinites engage in cannibalism?" That's what we're saying, So, um, that and the highly sexualized, um, you know, engagement, that's part of their end time things. So, the next thing then about Valhalla is that I've brought out, um, in Initiates of the Flame by Manly P. Hall. That book is a reflection book that basically gives a lot of details about the underground. I'll say, 7 major underground cities. We've covered some of those in our previous shows, one being Shambhala, which we talked about, that being under Dublin, Ireland there, one of the locations. Valhalla, uh, actually, you used to be able to find it on a map. They now, if you search for it, it's really difficult to find it, but I'll tell you how you can still find it and see it on the map yourself. Um, Look for Gove, Gove, Gove County, Kansas. And then once you get that pulled up, you look kind of in the lower right-hand corner, or it's kind of like it's not quite in the corner. It's kind of like if the corner's here, if you look just kind of like right about here, you'll see Valhalla, Kansas. But they removed it after, you know, I started bringing it out that that's where the location was. And under Valhalla, Kansas is where they have Valhalla Underground in all of their chalk. They've got like all these, um, like that area is very deserty. They've got like all these chalk formations made out of dirt and stuff that are these huge structures above ground. And that whole area is kind of marked off as high tourist areas, almost like a national park coming through. You've got a UN connection, I believe, with oversight of the land there. But, so that area is where it is. And Um, you've got a massive trafficking trail from Topeka, Kansas, all the way through Valhalla, and then across to other areas, other states. But with that, um, you know, Cash Patel was making the comments, we'll see you in Valhalla. Then, you get into Charlie Kirk's death itself. So let's go ahead if we have any maybe questions about that before we kind of shift to, the death itself, and we'll kind of talk how that ties into the warrior's death in the Odinism. Hope you've got to unmute there, Shanti.
Sorry, I've got the wind blowing so bad here today, and my wind chime is clanging in the background, so I switched my sound off. You were talking about Val Wagner, right? And then what happens in Valhalla if they then get to have been whatever warriors they were required to be to go to Valhalla? What is the setup in Valhalla? Is that not also with Freya?
No, it's not quite with Freya. She's not there because she's the ex. Um, it doesn't mean there's a lack of women, but it's almost like a massive boys club. Like that's if I could kind of just paint a picture, if you could think of all these Nordic warriors dressed up in animal fur, wearing all sorts of, like you almost like your Viking type imagery. Okay, because they're going to be dressed as the Nordic warriors. Their faces are going to be painted, and you get men that are very rough around the edges, very crude, and they're just going to be blatantly doing stuff in front of each other's faces, and it's going to include both, your men and women. They even have women warriors that are in there too, which your Nordic women fighters, um, they are intense. Like, these women can take on these men in battles, and their battles are interesting because we've gotten in past shows into battles, but they'll fight mostly like they'll have axes, some of them will have spears, some, broadswords are kind of more what they use, but it's like when they get into their battles, I mean, sometimes they're like hand to hand, face to face, and you're just like, woo, like you're hearing the metal clash and all sorts of stuff. And, they're all drunk, drinking. Um, but I guess that's like the best way and then to describe it. And then they have these massive like tables that are just like very long, and they sit on both sides of them, and they tell the, they're just crude, they're caressing her, harassing, trying to pick fights with each other. That's kind of the environment down there. Then you get, because it's not just that, but you get um the how I don't know if it's still used that way, but you get construction of ships down there. And it used to be used for the old ships that they would build to get up on the sea and the oceans. Um, and they're not like your pirate ships. They're like your old Viking massive ships, which usually are, made out of, um, I don't know exactly how to put it into words, but it's like your pirate ships will contain a lot of boards versus like your Viking ships are more hollowed out. They'll be made out of a massive, massive tree. And it doesn't mean that there's not other parts added to it, but the base of it, you you have this massive tree that's hollowed out. So different skills and things that they're gonna engage in there, but and still have the
Right.
women. And the women are gonna have the men too, like your women warriors are, doing all the crude stuff that the men are doing too.
Yeah. I just find it interesting, and I've said as well before, there's a military base or ex-military base. I think it is still probably a military base, whatever joke our military is now. I'm not even going to, I mean, it's embarrassing. But in South African military history's heyday, there's an entire area in Pretoria called Valhalla. And the military base there is also called Valhalla.
Oh,
And
interesting.
I
And where is that?
Pretoria in
Okay.
South Africa, and it's a well-known Air Force base, Valhalla Air Force Base. Um, I remember, I mean, I had a lot of friends who were at the time that I was obviously young and what have you, because our guys were forced to go at the military. A lot of my friends were at the army base in Valhalla. But I also know it's a place where a lot of the bigwigs they would meet and convene was in Valhalla. But I mean, this country, South Africa, and of course, it has a very strong military history. So there's a lot of um, definitely underground tunnels, a lot of
Mhm.
underground stuff that happens here as well. But anyway,
Yeah.
I
It'd be
didn't want to
interesting to
digress too
find
much.
out if that was tied to the other one too, you know?
But
Because
that's
they
what I'm saying.
oftentimes do have mirrored cities, so yeah.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. It's very, there has, for sure, there's a connection, for sure.
Yeah.
No doubt in my mind. It's just about figuring out what the connection is,
Yeah.
especially with it being a military base, but as well as a, um, what do you call it, where people live, a suburb.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Anyway,
you're
I
probably
didn't
right
want to
on with all
digress.
that.
Yeah, I didn't want to digress too much. And you were talking about Charlie. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that whole, yeah, the brother, see you in Valhalla, brother. And I know the Vikings, I know Swedish guys a lot. That's how they speak. They love speaking
Yeah.
about Valhalla. I mean, definitely. That's their favorite thing to speak about. Admit
It's like
one.
the
They
man's
even have,
man's death, you know?
yeah, totally. Totally. If you get invited to Valhalla, you've made it.
Right. That's right. You're like so
And
that's
I'm
the thing
like,
we gotta consider. It's like, it's like if we know this, then you've got to ask more about Charlie Kirk, who they paint the picture he was this good Christian guy, but maybe not so much what we think. I think, there's a lot more to show Masonic and Brotherhood connections, you know, and especially connections to Odinism than anything else. But um, I think his wife's in the system too. And, so some of the other things we see, like we know that, just in the system that their symbols mean so much. And when you look at him and his wife, there's all these organizations that they've started or are connected to. And that is part of the warrior's death. We see Charlie, underneath this tent, which is interesting because the way that they had the tent he was speaking under structured, it looks like that entrance to Valhalla. And the school that he was speaking at the moment of his death was actually a Mormon school, from my understanding. And I think that that school's imagery shows there's massive underground in that area. A lot of access, so when we think about how the system works, a lot of access to kids and people. Now we see, behind Charlie, we see, a screen that has all the symbols and images of the different companies that or organizations that he was connected to. Some of that being his own, the Turning Point, the others um, being the Urefi, um, which we'll get into in a minute with Urefi. But then you see him with the microphone in his hand, and if you think about that, what was his greatest weapon? It was his voice. So he died with his companies, everything he symbolized, and his voice, which was his weapon. So that's why they would consider it a warrior's death. But then you start to get into the companies, right? And the symbol, is kind of like that half crescent moon shape with the stars in the middle. Now, when we see that symbology, like, when we look at the sigils, and we've talked about when you see all the stars around or kind of in a C shape one way or the other, or a crescent moon shape one way or the other, that imagery connects to the councils. The other way we can see it is almost like the ring. You'll see the stars like in the formation of the ring of Saturn, which we see that turning point symbol, but it also being shaped like an arrow. And the combination of that, again, going back to the Odinism, which in Odinism, they'll use that arrow symbology like we see at the national parks, which when we break that down further, who really has authority over our national parks? Well, those are classified as UNESCO sites. And UNESCO is connected to what? The United Nations? Why does the United Nations have oversight of our land? On top of that, we know that the national parks, they have their own law. I don't know if everybody knows that, but they have their own courts. They have their own law enforcement who are Odinites, most of them, and connected to Brotherhood Sovereign Military, but they have their own law enforcement, their own law, their own courts. Like if you get a speeding ticket in the national park, you have to go to their courts to deal with that. So all of that is outside of jurisdiction of we the people because they're under a universal jurisdiction,
Why
which
is
is
that
under
though?
what? The councils.
Why is that? Why would they have a different court system?
Well, because they're under the universal, under the United Nations. And you'll see that even internationally, like I think, there in Africa, you guys have parks that are under UNESCO too, under UN control.
Yeah,
So it's one of their ways that
sandbox.
they mark the territory as sovereign. So like your national parks are under a sovereign system, your like London, Washington, D.C., Vatican, the Rome, all those are under national or I'm sorry, sovereign territories. Washington, D.C.'s a sovereign territory. So it kind of they'll label it that way, meaning everybody can come. It's marked as sovereign, meaning, it's under the universal rule outside of quadrant and regional territory. It's under the universal authority. And so if there's a matter there that they can't deal with in their courts, it's going to have to go before the UN to be settled, or the councils to be settled. So the other thing we see with that is that, turning point arrow in that crescent shape, we see somebody else's organization logo being very similar to that. And that's, the logo of Bill and Hillary Clinton with the Clinton Foundation. Now, when you look further then into not necessarily Turning Point, but some of the other connections to organizations, particularly with Charlie Kirk's wife, I think there's a strong concern to where we should ask or research or look into her, because you see the connection with what they do with children and different providing organizations that go in and help and provide relief to certain areas and provide certain things for kids. So very similar to what the Clinton Foundation was doing, only it's called America something. But I think it's under the Clinton Foundation. I think there was a direct connection between them and the Clinton Foundation, and I think there was a working together in some instances, particularly in the country of Haiti, which we know the Clinton Foundation was going in there after disasters. And, you have a mass amount of adult deaths, you have all these children. Where did the children go? So I think, we see some of that funneling stream.
But
Now,
I've also
go ahead.
I've also read and heard quite a few reports that she was involved with Romanian Angels, I think was her
That's
organization's
another
name.
high area. You have the communism in that country,
Yeah.
severe
And
suppression of the people.
that yeah, she was going there, apparently kicked out because she lost kids or kids went missing or something like that.
Right?
I'm not sure about that. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's some of the concern. Um, it's hard to know for sure, but I think that I think that there has been the trafficking of children with her and with Charlie, and I think they were kind of using his media presentation, or his media as a means to cover up some of that work that they were doing. But
Now, I have a question here, and I don't intend to, I mean, I don't mean to offend anyone, so I hope I'm not. But it's like she was a former beauty queen as well. Now, for me, I see a trend in this, that there are these women who are beauty queens. But now, firstly, isn't that kind of against what Christianity is about? That as a woman, you put yourself out there in very little clothing, um, pretty much sell yourself on your looks, right? And
right,
what we're seeing, a lot of these young women are actually mind controlled as well. They are all part of not all, I cannot say that, but I'm noticing a trend that they're part of this must be monarch programming type scenario, models, actresses, stuff like that, winning titles, moving on then to marry these
well, it's
next
like the trophy
generation.
wives in the system. You
Right.
get the priestesses and the trophy wives.
Yes. And then they marry the next generation, up and coming presidents or whatever, Charlie Kirks or whatever they are, right? So it's like grooming. But my point is that to me, I think that if you're following a Christian narrative, that's not it for me. I'm a conservative
Mhm.
person. I like to walk around in shorts and do whatever. But to stand and parade myself on a stage in bikini, bra and panties, basically, and evening gowns, and that is completely. not Christ-like. That is the point I'm making, and I'm not saying it with judgment. If you want to do it by all means. I mean, if you're a
Yeah.
beautiful woman and that's how you feel you want to express your beauty, absolutely. But I'm saying there's a narrative, and there seems to be a blindness around that because it seems like the public is blinded by the fact, well, by beautiful women, actually. You know, she's this beautiful woman, and yes, of course, she's pleasant and easy on the eye. So one kind of tends to forgive all past indiscretions, right? Isn't that something? And then, of course, they go on to marry these powerful men, and this is what we see happening. I don't know.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
I mean, I just don't have comments on that. There's things with her. I think more of what I picked up was not necessarily the beauty queen connections, which gets interesting, but I picked up more the personal, like someone had pointed out the necklace that she wore. One of them looks like your cross for the Knights of Malta. Then, like, there were pictures that were circulating that when she was, with Charlie at graveside or, at the viewing and stuff, she was wearing these two men's rings. One of them clearly was a Masonic men's ring. Um, so I picked up on that. It's like there's no mistaking that that's a Masonic ring. Um,
Hmm. But
so
what's
she had some hidden kind of like in this palm part here, like when you saw the rings, she had some embedded tattoos there, markings that were there that it what I consider embedded tattoo, it's like you get it's almost like a branding, like some of their and this happens with like some of the sex slaves, but you can get certain witches, priestesses, or warlocks who will do it too. But it's almost like they create a scar in a certain formation, whether that's a triangle, or like you'll get the Poseidon symbol can be another that they'll actually like, burn it so that they'll burn it on so there's a scar there. And so it's not like your typical tattoo. But both of her hands, from what I saw, had, that people pointed out, had some things like that. So that was curious. And yeah, who knows? Maybe she's like this big, like, Valkyrie type woman, Shanty. Maybe she like puts on her big Valkyrie outfit and, you know, maybe all the men pay to
yes,
watch her fight.
but what is the beauty queen trend? Do you understand what I'm saying? Have you seen that? There's a beauty queen trend in this Christian community that then goes on to marry powerful men.
Yeah. I mean, you see it like, um, it really pushes that idea or the image of the pure, the holy, for the women. But then, like, with that imagery that you see, like, we have one of the stores here where I am, it's almost like they give this country type feel, like the cowgirl, the dresses, like the beautiful dresses, but they're very like low, provocative, revealing, and then they'll wear the cow boots kind of image. And um y- there is that image of the woman that's going to present herself well, have beautiful hair, all sorts of stuff. So we have that kind of here in our area too, where it is kind of like that beauty queen image, cowgirl image, the wholesome, the pure, and yet there's that kind of hidden, provocative in everything. And they do, like, they are married to very, wealthy men, you know.
I mean, if I see this whole thing, and if I'm going to call it out, as I see it, it's hypocrisy at its finest. Really, it is. It's like, to me, it's hypocrisy at its finest. If we see the essence of our value is not on the physical appearance, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't take care of our physical appearance or want to
Right.
look pretty or look nice or whatever, right? But there's a difference in being a beautiful human, whether you're a man or a woman, embracing that, right? And, wearing clothing that you're comfortable in. I'm not saying you should never wear a bikini, Captain. You can come here and wear one every day. I'll even buy
Right.
you one, right? And my point is, there's a difference between going to the beach on holiday and wearing a bikini and having fun in the sun, enjoying the health and the comfort of your body, right? And just feeling healthy and lovely. And yes, feeling sexy and sassy too. There's nothing wrong with that. We're human beings. But it's when we take that to another level and we trade on that, and we then make that a marker of what our life is about. And exactly, so it puts us up there. How often do we hear about models being invited to the after parties of whatever it is, right?
Right.
So there's a certain genre that then gets uplifted into the elite circles. But it starts with, how pretty am I, right? And
Yeah.
we look at Epstein. I mean, the majority of women that were trafficked, from my memory, are models or were models or some in
Yeah, it's
something
huge
like
with
that, right?
that, you know.
So it's always, how pretty are you and how much value is placed on your looks. And I was a miss this and a miss that, and I won that, and ooh, I was in that advert and I was in that movie. Look at me, look at me, look at me. There's that narcissism that goes along with that from the women too, right? And that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. It's like
I think it's
that whole,
deeper. They get,
yeah,
it's like that's their method, that's their way of getting willing consent. They set it up where, you feel it's a career, a job, a way to get money, power, fame, travel. They present it as a job with perks. And then, once you're in there, that's when you realize that, really they're going to push that willing consent to the extreme where, if you want to keep all the perks, you're going to have to basically, sell yourself. And
right,
um, high level
exactly,
prostitution, is what it is. Your escort services.
exactly. And that's that, it's exactly that. And that's why I say, how many of these young women have been groomed to be these beauty queens, but yet they say, well, I'm this wholesome Christian. And I'm sorry, that in my opinion, be a beauty queen by all means, but that does not go along with the true essence of Christian values. That's my
Right.
point. That's where the
Yeah.
hypocrisy lies. Doesn't mean that as a Christian woman, you can't be beautiful or sexy or attractive. I don't say that at all. Please, I just want to make sure I'm getting that across. But I am saying, when you're trading on that and you're trading on the fact that you're this Christian,
Mhm.
that's where the danger comes in. And that's where the hypocrisy and where religion and Jesus' name is absolutely sent to hell, because that's not the essence of what Christ Christ of light, Christ of God. I mean, the lightest light that there is about. That's coming from a different energy, using that and manipulating that to manipulate the
Yeah.
crowds into
The
thinking
humility
that
versus the pride and the
exactly,
glorification of the self. Yeah. The vanity is a good word for
exactly.
that.
But it's like an inverted ego. So, oh, I was this and I was that and I was the miss this and I was the miss that. I'm still as beautiful as ever. I'm walking around like this radiant little ray of light next to my husband, glittering in gold and diamonds and the latest dental job, right? But
Right?
I'm now this wholesome family woman and I'm just there supporting my man. I don't know, there's something,
It's like the
if
eye
those values,
candy. I call it the eye candy effect, it's like the men
yeah,
have eye candy on their arm, hanging on their arm next to them, you know?
it's bizarre. And that's why I say it's such a hypocrisy. And I wish we can start seeing through that. You know, the more people start dangling religion in front of your nose and their Bible in front of your nose and using it as a stage prop, the less you trust them. And that's what I'm saying, when we're looking at these public platforms. And I think
Yeah.
it's wonderful to express your spirituality in whichever way works for you. But it's not about what we say, it's about who we are and what we do behind the scenes. And this, I
Yeah.
think, for me, is one of the biggest things I'm seeing about Charlie Kirk is that we can never just take these things at face value because it's one big fat lie. It really is.
Yeah.
Anyway, just my thoughts on that.
Yeah, there's definitely some things there with her, and is she using that previous fame in order to, as a means to traffic children um, through her organizations, and why do I bring that out? When we begin to look at all the players kind of stepping up around and knowing kind of their plots, their schemes, what they've been working on, um, you know, there's been a push to bring to the forefront and a deception for we the people. And I know because I've lived through that deception. Like, not, I mean, I had individuals that infiltrated my business, my ministry, and these individuals were trying to bring it in, then trying to convince me, particularly things about, DJT. Um, on top of that, then they would make claims like when they turned, and they came in as Christians. Some of these people, like, were supporting like a part of my personal life. Like, they were, came in as prayer partners, people helping my ministry. Some of them for 2 to 4 years. Like, some of the longer ones were 4 years. We prayed together every day. They knew every intimate detail of my life. I entrusted, uh, codes to websites and things that we were building together. They helped me with publishing books and stuff. But then it's like when they turned, there was that infiltration. And, um, with that, there were plots that, like, it started off first subtly, like, oh, I don't know if I trust so and so. What do you think? Could that person be bad? Um, all around DJT. Then they begin to formulate these plans. Then you had the Epstein stuff brought in. Um, then there were hints of, like, with the infiltration, there were people that these people were bringing people, anybody who followed me, anybody who would even make a comment off of our videos or, uh, would come to my events, like they purposely would infiltrate things that I hosted or had online so they could find out who was coming. Then they would target those people and invite them into, "Oh, let us tell you the truth about Jessie. We have to show you stuff." And they would bring them behind the scenes. And I've had, several people who went through that have told me about that. And they're like, they they have created videos, like they've created fake stuff that they share with people about you. And the only reason they knew it was fake was because they personally knew me. And, they've done the same thing to DJT, putting stuff out there that makes it look like he's in ritual or like he's engaging in pedophilia. If and this is what they wanted to release through the Epstein files. Who was pushing for him to release that to the people? Why did they not? They have had this for a long time, Shanti. Like, if they had that stuff against him, why the hell would they ever let him become the president? Why release the stuff after he's the president? That, if you've got it, if you know he's not worthy of that position, why did you not put it out in the first place? I'll tell you why they didn't put it all out in the first place, because I think it took them time to generate it all. And they had to get people who would go along, with it. You've got, a mix of some individuals who are true survivors, people who have really experienced stuff, been to places, and they've got a mix of survivors that are not real survivors. I've had people that outright are like, you hurt me, you abused me, you did stuff to me in rituals. And it was like, no, no, I didn't, you know, and it's like, on top of, you're not one of the, you were not at any of the rituals that I was in, because none of the children survived those. It's like, I personally can swear before the Lord God Almighty that not a single one survived. And if you had been at those rituals, if you were, one of the hierarchy kids, you would know that, and you would know how those children died, and you would know that none of those children survived. So it's like, but yet they claim to have videos, and it's like, you don't. It's like, it's like crazy stuff that people do. And, so that gets into some of this stuff, with the behind the scenes. Like, how do we know who's really good, who's really bad? There's more that we can look at as we get into Charlie Kirk and the individuals he's connected to. There's a high connection with people like Cash Patel, who are part of that bigger circle of those who have been doing the harassment, those who have been really, you know, infiltrating the survivor communities to control the narrative. Um, some of those people directly being out of my affidavits, that are connected through Cash Patel. Um, so you get a connection there to some military generals, to some paramilitary people who are connected to anti-trafficking organizations. Um, those anti-trafficking organizations being directly connected to military. Um, so watch the connections, watch who steps out in that, including, JD Vance. Um, I've said from the beginning, he's fantastic, but, uh, you know, given a chance or an opportunity, like, as I say that, what we see happening in our government right now is massive auditing and, a thorough cleaning of all branches, the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. And, it's my belief that, we've seen that cleaning with Doge, with the legislative and the executive. Now I fully believe they're on to the judicial. And, that's going to start to get to your local, your state governance levels as they begin to break into that. One thing about the system, I've talked about how my experience was that 7 out of every 10 were involved in the system, but I've also stated that really only 5% of those that I've experienced, in the system would I say really wanted to be there. When it's really a small percentage that really are, you know, diabolically evil. My proctor, Hillary Clinton, being among those. Hillary Clinton, really enjoyed the evil. Um, she is an evil woman and, had no holding back from worshiping Lucifer. She is in that 5%. But then you get the rest that it's like there's leverage, there's things that, there's choices that they have to make, and consequences with those. They were like me. They were a child that was brought up into that system. They don't have a way out that they can see. The leverage is too much of a price. It's a price they don't want to pay, and they don't have a way out. So, if given the chance to do the right thing, will they do the right thing? Will they do the job? Will they do it for we the people? Will they really honor and do what's right for the people, or will they use the position to uphold their brotherhood vows? That's the question. I think that that's what we see happening. So, um, none of the people that we have in our administration right now were meant to be in those positions. Not a single one. We're seeing a bunch of fakers till they make it. None of that, all of these positions, hierarchy children were trained from the time that they were little, went through massive ritual preparations and training for those positions. Like it's years of training you go through for that so that you can fulfill the job perfectly, not make any mistakes. And we have all these people, they weren't trained for those positions, you know? They're really having to try to do the job, because it's most of the people you would see in those positions, those weren't their original jobs. Um, they were
Would it
trained, they would have a fake job, their cover job. They're not really doing the job or the work. They're using that position to do their brotherhood job.
okay, that's
I mean, what better way, you know, what better way than to pit people, when you put people who aren't supposed to be there and you're telling them they need to do a job, you're going to quickly find out about brotherhood alliances. Either they're going to do the job, but if they do the job, they have to, you know, do things against their brothers. Like think of Kash Patel. If we know he's an Odinite and now he heads up our FBI, is he really going to do his job as an FBI director? Or is he going to, uphold his brotherhood vows? I think it's going to come out exactly what he's doing. And, I don't think we the people are going to be pleased with his job because he really has been, upholding his brotherhood vows.
I'm just popping some questions on that I've seen, Jess. I know
Yeah, that's a great
maybe there's just
question. TimothyCharlesHomeseth.com brought out this, the trial with our Kevin Arnett or Annette, and that was really a matter of concern. And I'll tell you why. Um, some very curious things. So Annette like has been involved with a group, and I think we had Robert, I always forget which name comes first. David Robert Steele also did a very similar group, international group with tribunals. And that is connected through sovereigns. So these are individuals that, have declared themselves sovereigns, meaning that they're their own authority, and they decided to start these tribunals. What was brought out in the videos, and when you watch it, it should be of big concern, because we've got this group that supposedly they're, going after people who have committed crimes against humanity and crimes against children, which we all want to support. You know, Kevin Arnett was one of the big ones, bringing out the mass grave sites in Canada. Um, the assault of the Catholic Church against the Native people. So all that is good in nature, right? And it draws us because we're like, we want to support that. We want the truth to come out. We want the crimes to stop happening to the children. But then you get where all of a sudden he comes out, and not all the information, like they make it sound good. He said they had, over 900 and some documents that they were going through, which are like, wow, that's a lot of evidence. That's a lot of information. But in that, they start throwing out people that, are not part of things. And then you've got witnesses coming in that I would not validate as true witnesses. Um, so here's why, you know, with that, some of the things, like they named, a whole bunch of people, primarily 13 people. One of them being Ruda, who's the head of NATO, one being the Pope out of Chicago, and one being Donald Trump, and claimed that they had, evidence of those people being in ritual, doing stuff to children. Now, this is the same stuff. Think about this. This is the same stuff we're told about the Epstein files, right? But those weren't released. And now all of a sudden we have a sovereign group claiming they did a tribunal, claiming similar, if not the same, evidence. Could we find a connection between Kevin and Annette and the same people that were trying to bring out that evidence for the Epstein file things? We can. So there's some back connections there that are important, because when you understand those connections, those go to individuals that are part of sovereign military. All right. So now it's like, okay, there's stuff being brought out. Some of the witnesses they bring forward, particularly about DJT, are, like they bring out a bodyguard or whatever. But then he says this bodyguard claims to be a Ninth Circle member and claims to have been in rituals with DJT. And this person wants to take a plea deal. So that's why they gave the information. Well, here's the thing. At the top levels, particularly with the sovereign military, you are trained, you're not going to take a plea deal. You're not afraid of jail. You're not afraid of death. That's what you're trained to do. You're trained to give your life for the elite. You know, in fact, if people knew the fullness of what they go through in their training as children to get into those positions, there's no way this guy is going to take a plea deal if he was actually in a ritual. The other thing is that, there's a difference between the governance side of the brotherhood and the sovereign military side and your circle groups. What, those who are protecting are going to, what is their involvement at the rituals. All right. They're not going to be actually participating in the same circle group rituals as the elite are. They're going to be, supplying, they're going to be cleaning up, they're going to be providing perimeter protection. So there's things there that I see that it's like, hmm, you know, and then you get into the deeper elements and it's like, I don't think, yeah, this guy's just giving general information that has been public about the ninth circle. He's not giving me anything where I could say, hey, this guy is ninth circle. Because your ninth circle is connected to your councils and your special councils in particular. And anyway, I'm just going to leave it there that I would not validate that individual's testimony in any way. Also, being a high level, being out of that myself in those upper circle groups, I've already brought out that DJT was not a part of those upper circle groups, so it's like there's no validity to that person's testimony. So there was stuff like that that Arnett was bringing out. Now, the Pope is out of my circle groups out of Chicago. So I will validate that absolutely he's committed crimes against children and humanity that I myself have witnessed. Bring the bastard down. I will say that about him. But this group, they bring out Ruda too, the head of NATO. But why do they not bring a single person out of from the United Nations? That's important. Why do they not attack a single person out of the councils? That's because they are connected to the UN and the councils. And that's going to get into their connection with the Galactic Federation, the Universal Sovereign Military. So
Right.
they're trying to bring forward stuff. Now they make a direct assault on our country and our president. In the videos that he put out, they said that they'd already decided these people were guilty. They did a trial. They literally put out a reward for people to help them arrest our president, the Pope, Ruda, others. They publicized that award. Then they claimed that when they arrested, they also were confident, they were using DJT's executive order that anybody involved in human or child trafficking, that, their property would be seized. And so they claimed that when they arrested these people, they were going to seize their properties. Now let's think of the reality of this. All right. And many of us would agree our governments are not good. But at a point, you
Mm.
know, we know that multiple governments, we have to think, who are we putting ourselves under? Whose authority? So they claimed that, let's just say they arrested the Pope, right? What properties all come with the Pope? You have the Vatican and you have every single Catholic church worldwide. So all of a sudden now we would have a foreign group, that claims international jurisdiction having a sovereign authority over every single Catholic church. I mean, think of how many communities in America have Catholic churches. This is a matter of national security now because who's going to have oversight over that group? Who's going to give accounting? Is it really we, the people? We don't know all of the backstory of these groups, and we need to be asking the questions. We need to not be quick to give away our authority and our rights to oversee our government, which we need to, make sure that's back in place, right? And that means each of us needs to have responsibility in making sure our local governments are working and operating as they're supposed to. Um, so then too, it's like if they did DJT, what properties does he all own worldwide? So there again, you would have an international group connected to sovereign military that under the United Nations that are all of a sudden, this all coming right after DJT has broken alliances with UNESCO, taken back our authority over our national parks and every historical site that in our country that UNESCO got their fingers into. And all of a sudden now they're trying to find a way to get back in. So there was a lot behind that, with I think they're using, the good work that was done, some of the good things that they brought out with Canada, some of the mass grave sites. But then you go deeper, we have others connected to them, like Flynn, through the Q operations. And what were some of the tag phrases? He knows where all the bodies are. Is there a direct connection between that sovereign military group and General Michael Flynn? And is that behind some of the smaller sovereign military groups that we see operating, causing chaos and havoc in our country, like Antifa, Proud Boys, Fatima? I think we'd find all that connection and the connection to the sovereign military there. Then you get the Galactic Federation connection, and that gets really deep because on their site, it looks like there's a connection to the postmasters. Well, when you follow that back, your postmasters is a whole nother sovereign territory. And who's the head of that? You have your Postmaster General, Jay Gould, who is also the commander in chief of the Galactic Federation. So who's doing the tribunals? Was it the postmasters? Was it the Galactic Federation, the Universal Military? And is that who just declared war and that they were going to infiltrate and take over our country and kidnap our president? I think that's exactly where that goes. And I will firmly stand with that. And, in that, then, I can't say that I'm a fan of what Kevin Annette is doing in that situation. Um, all of that again then being coming against the plots against DJT, and with that the plot to release to we the people mass amounts of information about child trafficking that takes our eyes off who's really doing it and puts our eyes on who they want to make us believe was engaged in that. Get rid of those people, and we think they've come in as heroes. We applaud them, we support them, and yet they're covering the very trafficking that they've been engaged in all along with the sovereign military. And it puts the sovereign military again in control of our country, you know? So,
It's such a vicious circle, and yet everything is so. It's like the spider web, right? It all just comes back to a point, really, a single point, and that's. I mean, talking about the postmasters as well. Just obviously looking at the past couple of weeks shows you've been doing about that. I mean, it's insane. And, again, seeing how the money that they're stealing is really going right back into these disgusting projects they're doing, whether it's
right.
testing on children and or creating chimeras or whatever it is they're doing. That's what where the money's going. We wonder
Yeah,
where they're getting the money to do this stuff. It's coming from us. I mean,
exactly.
duh. Anyway,
And you
sure.
don't see them bringing out the money trail, you know,
No.
that that's important for us to understand. How are they stealing the money from us to support their nefarious deeds? Um, watch for those that try to put themselves out there as the heroes, making it look like they're, doing rescues, like they're doing good. And I always evaluate it, as to how do we know the system is really working and operating? We know that the system is funneling children through the school systems, that there's a connection with that to the sovereign military doing training within our own military and military infrastructures. So if we're not seeing that, um, you should be careful. If they're making it look like they're military and they're going off to other countries doing all these rescues, and that it's, just worldwide or just through certain avenues, but they're not addressing how it's really happening here in our country. Why do they do that? Because they shift your eyes to those they consider the expendable children, and if
Exactly.
you'll applaud them for rescuing them, that's great. But guess what? There's two sets of children that are trafficked in the system.
Exactly.
What about the hierarchy kids? What about those that they're training? Why do they protect them? Why do they not tell you about what they're doing in the schools or with the military? It's because that's their next generation of sovereign military.
Mm,
That's how they ensure
exactly.
the system keeps going. So if they're not
Exactly.
bringing out that information, then they're just cover-uppers. They're covering up what they're doing with the hierarchy children so that they can continue to do it, right?
And using the hierarchy kids through torture from birth, basically, and manipulation, and oftentimes turning them into some extremely vicious monsters when they get
Right?
to being 30 or 40 or 50. We look at these guys, and yes, as we always say, these guys began as kids. And I was reading something very interesting somewhere, I can't remember where, but it's like what they were saying is, the torture or the programming, the torture carries on, and you know, and I think that's also why the 12-year-old rituals are so important, because you have to use your own will. The child or the person has to get to the point of using their own will to create
Mhm.
that atrocity, whether it's a sacrifice or something, and not an altar or a forced whatever it might be, right? So they then get that child to actually use their own will. And once the child has used their own will, it becomes easier for the child to then continue down that path. And I think that's where I was thinking. I think we mentioned it earlier on. It's like their ambition is to kill the empathy gene, right?
Mhm.
Where they are showing the kids so much blood and torture, and that these guys are trained to feel nothing for children,
Right?
right? I mean, that's obvious. They
So
children,
right. So it's like, do
anything
you
in this
believe they would take a plea deal? Like when you know the reality of that, it's like, is one person gonna take
exactly
a plea deal, you know, because they're like they're prepared to die. They go through so much training as a kid. They're not afraid of death. They're not gonna, you know, th- they're gonna keep their brotherhood circles to death. They're not gonna
right.
give up what they're connected to. They're not gonna spill the beans, and they're not willingly gonna do it. It, it's like, I don't know.
Jess, yeah, it's a process, but we will eventually figure it all out. I have no doubt about that. But thank
Yeah,
you so much for joining me again today, and for those of us who joined in the chat. It's difficult to see how many people are in here when it's on members because it doesn't show. But really great chatting. Thank you for the
yeah.
great
Thank you, everyone.
information. I know there's a lot more, and we will carry on talking about this in future shows as well. So thank you, and thanks, guys. I appreciate you all joining us as well. Jess, is there anything else, or
No,
would you
this is
like to close
great.
this lesson?
Yeah. Well, I would like to. I'm always putting up the events and the new series videos that I have that are really informative. Again, a great resource for you on my website, kingdomlivingwithjessie.com, is the Unveiling of the Systems series. I do have all three of the Architecture and Altars series are now up on the website. And those are going to really be helpful for those of you that, you're wanting to know how the system is working in your area. Um, it will teach you how to read the structures of the buildings to understand and know what altars do they have there, where are the altars, and what sacrifices are they doing on the altars. That series also gets into some advanced spiritual warfare. We begin to break down, what is the connection between the altars and spiritual warfare in the areas. So I encourage you to check that out. And then I do have a live event in Chattanooga, Tennessee, November 7th and 8th. So if you're able to come for that, I'd love to see you there. So I want to put all that out. And let's go ahead and we'll close in prayer here. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this conversation. And Lord, we thank you for your truth that we know we can stand in your word. We know, Lord, that your word says that all things will be laid naked and bare before the eyes of men, before your great and coming day, Lord. So we thank you that you see all the evil that goes on, and you have declared that that evil shall not remain in the dark. It shall not remain in the underground nor in the lower places, nor shall it remain unseen. But even in these last days, you said that the command would go forth, that the earth itself would spew out the wickedness within it. Your word says that the earth has a voice, and that the earth is one of the two witnesses in heaven, um, giving testimony to both the evil as well as to those who walked in your ways, as well as the blood of Christ. So we thank you for those two witnesses, and we thank you, Lord, that evil can only heap up so much, and then the time for judgment comes. Um, we ask that indeed your judgment, your justice would go forth. We thank you that you are a judge who judges in righteousness and truth. And Lord, we thank you for that. And we thank you that we can know with certainty, Lord, that we are yours, that as your word says, we shall judge even the angels, Lord. So we thank you that you give us this information so that we can judge correctly, that we can learn to discern and be able to express the authority that you have given us to rule and to reign with you. We thank you for all these things and pray this in your powerful name, Jesus. Amen. Oh, there you are.
Amen. And thank you. Thank you, Jessie.
Thank you.
Great, guys. Thank you so, so much. We will see you back next week again. And I wish you all a beautiful weekend and bless you all. Have a fantastic time with your families. And yeah, look forward
Yes.
to seeing you next week again.